Hi, welcome to this video. I'm going to loosely refer to it as a tutorial. What I'm going to do is let you watch my technique and explain myself as best I can, and you can take away whatever you want. You can sit there and copy step by step what I do, or just observe and take away some key points that you think will benefit your workflow, or just sit back and watch. So, in this video I'm going to be making and texturing a single model and then rigging it also. The thing I'm going to aim for today is going to be a tank, which is a nice inorganic popular, without the interruptions, model choice. Organic objects will come in my future videos, being more complicated. I'm going to start off basic today, so away we go. I'm modelling a tank. And this is also, by the way, a concept tank, so it's not going to be created from a reference. It's going to be completely freeform design. Gonna mute that, definitely. I prefer to model in with the clipping of the back face disabled with this button, so I can see the topology of all of my mesh. That's just me. The technique I'm using today is edge modelling. Typically when people start out modelling, they'll use a box modelling technique to build up their models by adding primitives and placing them in and joining them together directly, and then they slowly advance to this edge modelling technique where you take your model all the way through from a primitive and extrude until you get what you want. Obviously that's not the same for everyone, we're all different, so some people may comfortably jump into this type of workflow. I'm going to model the turret separately from the main body, and also each of the tracks separately from the main body also, because that will be useful for rigging later on. I'm going to add another primitive and begin edge modelling that into the turret section. I think it's worth mentioning my experience is primarily games design, so my workflow will be slightly more adapted to that. Some of the techniques I might employ during this video would not be exactly useful for or recommended for modelling of an animated for a model intended for animation. You might not want to do some of the things I do here, and conversely, if you're making a game, you might want to do them as opposed to things you'll do with high poly models. I'm going to keep this a relatively low poly project. It's in an organic object, and it's quite a rigid shape, so there's no need for hugely smooth surfaces. some minor detailing on the tank turret. I'm going to bring that back. And begin adding some greater detail. Just adding some details. I'm going to add gratings, exhaust gratings, fuel barrels, support railings, aerial antennas, and the entry hatch on the front structure. One technique for adding detail into a mesh is to extrude a face and scale it down, and then modify the shape of it. Also occasionally matching it to the surface around is required, and then you have some extra topology to play with. In this case I'm going to create a cross-sectional shape from that topology I've just added, and then I'll extrude it into the volume, which will make the extra detail, in this case the entry hatch. Into the tank. I'm just adding the detail to the mesh of the exhaust vents. Obviously, as I said, this is a concept tank, so there is no real engineering reason, there's no real design consideration, so some of this, if there are any tank engineers out there, might really be screaming at your screens right now that this is all wrong, but this is just aesthetics. adding a radio antenna aerial. I'm just going to take that technique of creating topology and then adding detail for some panel detailing across the tank surface. There's a lot of trial and error also involved in the modelling process, so you might find yourself going directly back on what you've done. That's fine, that's allowed. Don't worry if that happens to you. In fact, worry if it doesn't happen to you. I'm quite happy that that's enough detail on the tank now. I'm going to add the tracks and some final modifications after that, and then begin texturing. Tanks, tracks will be quite easy to create. The basic idea of tracks, the fact that it's just duplicated objects that are all the same, is to create one good instance with all the necessary requirements. I've offset the center of the object so that when I replace them, the rotation that is made mimics the constraint of the type of hinge connection between the tracks. So it's basically like I'm connecting them, and I can move them with an accurate rotation to the next track, and that begins to take shape quite nicely. So I can place them in the place I need to go. I'm going to clean up the tank mesh by creating a space for that tank tracks to go in. Just creating a wider body for the tank, which also scales the area I've just created to put the tank tracks in, so that they match more snugly, if that's being used in the right context. And some tweaks to the scaling should leave me with some nice tracks. Just now begin work on the cogs. So I'm going to begin with a cylinder for the primitive for the cogs. Relative the low pi, and I'm going to take the shortcut method. I'm going to extrude all of these faces individually. Scale them away from the median point, but that also affects the scale in local terms, so I'm going to counter the scaling of their face sizes by scaling it to the individual origins, and that gives me a comfortable cog. Just going to add some extra detailing. Also going to compensate the proportions here, just to get them to look more preferable for a cog. And the brilliant thing about the cogs is they're also like the tank tracks. You create one instance and then just throw them all roughly in the right place. And also with tank tracks, I've made them appear more fitting. With the cogs, they don't. This isn't an engineer's model, so they don't need to work perfectly. Of course, the more accuracy you put in, the nicer your model's going to look. There won't be so many things people can pick out from it as being problems, which is always good. when creating things. And there we have one side of tank tracks. So I will duplicate those for both sides after I've finished texturing. I'll now move on to the texturing process. In preparation, I'm going to create some materials to work with. Well, before that I'm actually going to make some final tweaks to my meshes. I've just noticed room for improvement is to tweak the appearance of some faces by setting them to have smooth shading, just to give a better look to the edges instead of having very flat, blocky looking shapes, which you do want in some cases, but not for your barrels and not for your smoothed corners of your hatches or your tank turrets, or rather the outside of them. I'm going to keep the inside to have a flat shading for the grooves, which the turret follows just as an extra detail. I think that's the major areas covered. And there you have it. I'm just going to create a small amount of lighting, enter textured mode for the texturing workflow, add a ground to give some more depth and perspective on the image. Might change I'm going to go into GLSL mode to give more accurate representation of the lighting rig, for tweaks to the materials of the objects, the specular values and diffuse values. Of course, any tweaks I make will not be a generic use anywhere settings, and if I moved it to a different lighting mode I'd need to recalibrate them to achieve the look I want. All the common materials will take the same material. This will be tank body. I'm also going to create separate materials for the different sections of the body of the tank. I'm only going to create one material here and then put it across all of the instances of the object, the cogs and the tank tracks. Right, so for this material I'm going to use layers of textures that I've acquired. I'm thinking camouflage, some metal texture and some paint texture as well for wear and tear, possibly some dirt in places also. So I'm going to make camo, no caps lock. I'm going to browse for images. So I'm just going to find that image now. Not an ideal mapping. Just going to go into the image editor so I can unwrap the mesh, and then I'm going to change the mapping to the UV texture, and I can directly modify the mapping of the texture. I think that'll do for that layer of the texture. I'm going to add metal texture. I've just been modifying the values for this particular texture. I've set its mapping to a UV texture, which is an unwrapping a particular mapping of the 3D mesh data into 2D coordinates that can be placed over an image, and the texture can be wrapped around into the 3D space. The mapping is just plainly mapped directly from 2D to 3D, and the image is put on the mesh that way. I've made two layers mapped in the same way but with different layers so I can modify both textures separately, both proportions of both textures separately. And you can notice that I change one and the other texture stays where it is. I'm mapping the camouflage just as a direct colour onto the tank's diffuse colour, and the metal grain in the same way, but with multiplying its value against the diffuse colour, which bleeds through the camouflage layer below. And I've also enabled it to affect the specularity colour of the object as well, which gives it a more textured look. So that's that so far. I'm also going to add another layer onto this material of rust, and this can be mapped with the same so I'm going to map that with the generated mapping because that gives a nicer look than, well, I think that effect works quite nicely from some points as a streaky rust inferring kind of wear from rain or seeping liquid falling off the surface of the tank. I'm going to try different methods and tweak this until it looks right. There are many different overlay blending techniques that can be used to give different effects depending on what you're trying to bring to your mesh with the particular texture. You may begin to notice that if you layer too much up using multiply, which is the most generically useful, you'll end up just darkening the material, so you have to be careful. As you can see, also going to allow it to affect the colour of the specularity to some degree, also bleeding through the metal grain texture, so I get a good compromise between the rust and the metal texture. These are all about tweaking values here. I'm going to add a final layer in. And this is a frost layer. Going to map it on a UV, might need to make it another separate layer to make it look acceptable on the tank. Yep, I think I'm going to make it a new layer. So we'll add a new UV layer and map it onto that. We've got quite a few textures built up on this material at the minute, for the simple fact that they're tweakable, so I can remove the rust and have a nice new looking tank. I can add the frost layer back. I'm going to finish tweaking the frost layer. Really want that to have an effect on the specularity of the mesh. Very glossy effect. I think the tank top can take the same texture as the base of the tank. Just fixing the UV layers because they'll go to a default unwrapping, which is each face gets the whole image. Sometimes is what you want, other times typically it's definitely not what you want. Final layer. And with this I can now tweak the material for those parts. There we go. We're beginning to build up the texture of the tank. It's worth mentioning at this point that the texturing technique I'm using at the minute is primarily for objects with consistent textures. You pretty much, in organic objects, I'm going to teach a more advanced and diverse technique in the next tutorial, but for this tutorial we'll carry on with this technique. I think I may introduce the same textures onto the turret. I'm just going to tweak the camouflage texture and lower its influence on the overall colour of our object, of the tank. This will give a nicer, I guess it's all down to personal preference, or how well you understand your audience or client, depending on what you're doing, but I'm going to keep it with that for the time being. Just going to change the diffuse on the ground to a green cross. Actually, I'm going to texture it. Just remembered I reserved a texture for this, so I'm going to use it. Okay, I may replace the image with a different variant. Oh, I mentioned a different method of texturing that we'll go through later. That primarily will target the tiling problem, which if I zoom out, the MIP mapping allows you to see clearly the tiling of the texture. That will be addressed with the second technique, so at certain points that's not an issue and that's acceptable. For here, for example, this perspective is not too noticeable, the tiling effect. So I'm going to carry on with this texturing. I'm going to do the tank tracks now. And do not want to add a new texture. I'll use an existing one. Metal texture. It's quite a, for ease of use, I'm going to leave it with the generated texture mapping. I mean, you can always change that in your version. I will be making the blend file available for you to download at the end of this tutorial. changing the shading settings, and I'm going to employ, hopefully, a trick to save me the time of texturing every object individually. Going to copy, or if I can find the menu. There we go. And that copies our texture to all the objects. I'm just going to create a new considering using smooth shading. We'll see how that looks when I've added some textures. Again, these are going to be made out of metal. Possibly some rust effect from wear and tear. Going to consider using smooth shading now. I'm going to try and tweak the diffuse to match. Right, I'm perfectly happy with that, so I'm going to copy that material to all the other cogs, also smoothing the shading setting. This is a useful trick if you are using Blender. You can select all the objects, make sure the object with the material you want is the last one selected to make it the active object. Make links and materials, and it puts it all across to your new objects. I'm going to move my tank tracks into the relevant position, and also now going to do a trick. I'm going to parent them to the body of the tank before duplicating for the other side. Also didn't make the cogs symmetrical. Can select the similar materials, deselect the ones on the side that are facing the correct way, and flip them around by scaling them exactly -1 negative 1 in the y direction, and we're starting to get a tank coming together. I think as it is, that's quite acceptable, and everything else you could think to do to it would just be tweaking the material. So that is one workflow and texturing modelling technique. See what that looks like as a rendering. And tweaking some settings for the rendering. See how this works out. I've also got a very basic lighting rig. I'm just going to make some tweaks to the material. Just going to tweak the way the camouflage texture affects this material. Increasing the contrast of the material and its specularity. Hopefully the rendering will show you this a bit better. I'm just going to tweak the ambient occlusion settings. A bit of a scare there. I'm just going to save this. Very good practice. Saving the work frequently. Although you will obviously receive your, courtesy of the Blend Foundation, free autosaves in the temp file, which you'll find in the C drive somewhere. Basically, this tutorial has now peaked. You can find the blend file at the URL on the link provided about here, and I hope you've learnt anything you've hoped to learn from this, and this doesn't have to be your final product. Just tweak some more values, play around with the file, and hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks.